In the season's premiere of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing the win against Fiorentina. We'll be previewing the upcoming games against Benevento and Lazio, this week's Moggi, Frog and Moratti, season preview, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com. Benvenuti, bentornati to another season of Studio Inter. I'm your host, Nima Tavalla-Iruzzari, welcoming you back to, it feels like we literally just stopped doing these, but it is a COVID year, and everything is pretty intense, and Antonio Conte is even more intense, or maybe I've just been exposed to him a little bit too much, more than I'd like. But before I get to all of that, let's introduce our panelist, the SempreInter.com preview writer, Mr. Mohamed Nasser.
Hey, very excited to be back, and in honor of our guest today, I'll say woof.
Yes, and
we have a dog joining us this evening.
Yes, we have a dog joining us. No, and that is Mr. William Beckman over there. Welcome, Will, to another season.
Hello. Hope everyone enjoyed their 10 minutes of rest. We're straight back into it, and I look forward to it.
And we're also joined by a good friend from the Athletic in Houston, Mr. Mike Pialucci.
Athletic Dallas. We got
Dallas, sorry.
Cities right here.
Yeah.
God damn, that's like confusing Bergamo and Milan. What are you doing?
Marvel.
We don't want to do that. But it is good to be back here. Good to be here with a fellow athletic writer. And well, I have not enjoyed my 10 minutes of rest given how the Mercato is shaping up. But here we are anyways.
Yeah, and we are joined by the Athletics, Mr. James Horncastle, who churns out content like no one else right now. Well done. I got to say, I really liked the Milan piece. It was really good.
Oh, good. I mean, that's lovely to hear, Nima. It would be great to do something like that with Inter, if only they'd return my calls.
Yeah, well, Inter and media are a season of its own, and not just an episode. Right, let's get to it. Speaking of Inter and the media, when last we left them, they had just lost the Europa League final, and they were going to have sorry?
Yeah, that was the Max Allegri episode.
That was the Max Allegri episode when Conte resigned because they wouldn't get him Arturo Vidal. But now he has Arturo Vidal, and unfortunately for us, he also has Aleksandar Kolarov in a central defender position, which we saw for 90 minutes against Fiorentina. I'm going to ask you, James, starting things off. I mean, we know that Inter and all clubs are affected by COVID, and financially, of course. But I want to start right there at that meeting at the villa, or Moratti's. It's supposed to be Moratti's villa. This tavolo di pace, these peace talks. In retrospect, that doesn't feel like it was a peace talk. It felt like it was the terms of surrender of everyone else in favor of Antonio Conte. Do you agree with that, or how do you look at that whole situation?
Look, I think Conte is a manager who does a lot of posturing, and in some respects, it doesn't surprise me that they get to that meeting and they come to a resolution, even though in the past we've seen him resign and kind of fall on his sword, as he did at Juventus, and leave his club in the lurch at the last possible minute. But I think, often in the heat of the moment when we see him post-match venting, it's hard to see beyond that and appreciate that there is a logical, rational Antonio Conte behind it, and that if you sit him down, he will listen. And I think in that Villa Bellini context there, it was made very clear to him that, look, we have gone above and beyond, not just in the transfer window, but in appointing you. We still have Luciano Spalletti on our books at the moment. And we're paying you a lot of money. We've just signed Ashraf Hakimi for 40 million euros, which is a deal no one found out about until after it's done, which, by the way, is very difficult to do in Italy. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's going to be very difficult to kind of see the change, have the change you want to see. So what do you want to do, Antonio? And I think that the clear thing with him was
I want Arturo Vidal and Aleksandar Kolarov.
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, those are deals that could be done for little or nothing in terms of fee. And I wouldn't say Conte is easy to satisfy, because the reality is he's never satisfied. But they could do those deals for him. I think ultimately, let's not forget the context of that meeting. It is, Antonio, if you really think this is a terrible situation, then walk away. But that means walking away from his contract. He's the highest paid coach in the league. You have to assess what kind of damage it would do to his reputation to leave a club that has kind of bent over backwards for him. And to also, if you look at how Conte has left his last 3 club jobs, resigned from Juventus 2 days into pre-season, which they've never forgiven him for, complained throughout his second season at Chelsea to the point that that relationship soured, and didn't end on the best of terms. It ended with them going to court, and the court finding in favour of Conte and paying him out the remaining year of his contract. Finishing up the end after just 1 season at Inter, when they've kind of done everything for him. I think, ultimately he had to take stock and say, that's not good for me to walk away, even with all these kind of problems that I've been complaining about all season, which are not just linked to the fact that I believe my squad is not deep enough to compete for the titles I want to compete for. We're a leaky club. The comms team doesn't do a good enough job of protecting us from transfer rumors and all the gossip stories that ultimately distract us from getting results on a weekly basis. And then there's Inter's point of view, which is like, damn, we've just agreed to pay this guy for 3 years a colossal salary. We can't sack him. We're already paying Luciano Spalletti and his staff for the remaining 2 years of the deal that we signed for him. The year just the season before, because in Spalletti's last season they extended his contract. So in some respects, it came to the right conclusion, I suppose. And from what I've been told, and I think there's some self-interest in the club kind of putting this out, but Zhang played a very key role in basically coming over, placating Conte, and just being a unifier there for the club, be it the sporting side, in terms of Marotta and Ausilio, and be it the coaching side, which is Conte. So I found the last couple of weeks very, very interesting in that nothing has really happened at Inter. No one said anything. Aside from that Lukaku double-page spread that was in Gazzetta, they haven't done any media. And I texted you about that, Nima, the other day, and the reason why it stood out to me was because Inter are a club that always do media. They do, in some respects, too much media. And for this radio silence to happen from really like the Europa League final and that summit in Villa Bellini to the start of the season, for them to do no real kind of media engagements at all, and not to have, this time of year, as all of you guys know, Inter have already been linked with around 3,000 players. And that hasn't happened this year. So I get the impression that something has changed internally, which, will placate Conte as much as the signings of Arturo Vidal and Aleksandar Kolarov. Yeah, it's always a fascinating club to follow.
Yeah, it's never boring.
Well, it has, Nima. This is the problem.
No, I don't. Well, it depends. It depends on your angle. I mean, Mattia Darmian and that is it's not boring. It's suicidal. It makes no sense.
They're boring, Nima. They're not boring signings. But that I think is kind of what Conte wants. He wants kind of a under the radar, low profile Inter. I thought it was very interesting when they spoke. When was it? Probably the eve of the Fiorentina game. Him and Moratti spoke, and neither of them mentioned the S word, Scudetto, which is what Conte has always wanted them. He's never wanted them to say that, even though we all know that that's kind of what the objective is and is everything that Conte wants. I mean, the reason why he's so bitterly disappointed for the last third of last season was because he knew that they weren't going to win it and they could have won it. So I don't know. This new line at Inter is quite interesting, even if it's quite boring from a neutral or fan point of view.
Will, did you have a question for James?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've got that on record. Everyone's heard that, what James just said. The last 2 weeks have been interesting because nothing has happened. That's Inter for you. If you just need one line. No, I was gonna ask about pretty much what's been discussed. So I might switch it to the pitch. Obviously, Inter have only played one game, and although it felt like it went on for about 3 years as a supporter watching it, Juventus have played 2. Everyone else has played 2. Obviously, Inter have been told by Conte not to talk him up too much or talk up their title chances too much in public. That's at least what we think is one of his key rules for this season, not to sort of expose him to criticism. But given what we've seen in that match against Fiorentina on Saturday, and given maybe the trouble that Juventus had against Roma, how do you see the state of play with admittedly a week left in the transfer market? I mean, firstly, is it just those two, or do Atalanta have a chance as well? Do you think that this is a better chance than last season, despite Darmian and despite all of Nima's hatred for Kolarov? Do you think could this be the year?
So I love Aleksandar Kolarov. From what
did I in 2015 when he was good.
Okay, Nima. Like, I saw this was a Twitter reaction after the game because, and to be honest, I think it was a reaction to a tweet I put out, which was, I don't think I'm ready to see Arturo Vidal England play at the same time, same team, which I'm still not. And the common kind of Twitter response to that was, it's not 2015 anymore. If it was, that'd be great. And ultimately, these are still two guys who will win games for you against a Cagliari, against a Benevento, against a Spezia. And I mean, to be honest, I'm doing them a disservice because they can do more than that.
I think you and I could beat Spezia in midfield, James.
To be honest, you haven't seen me on a football pitch, Will. So I take that as a massive compliment.
When are we playing Spezia? Because I won't be coming on after that podcast. I think I've just made a mistake.
But I like Kolarov because usually when I go to Milan to watch Inter or Milan, usually it's been Inter recent years. I happen to stay in the same hotel as Roma. Last time when Roma and Inter played out a 0-0 last December, which was one of those classic Inter games where they create loads of chances and for some reason just don't take them. But Kolarov was in the lobby that day. I'm digressing here. This is a massive, weird, self-indulgent tangent. But he is a tall man. I had no idea how tall Aleksandar Kolarov. He's a unit. And as we all know, he can take a free kick as well, which is something that apparently Inter have signed Christian Eriksen for, and it's the only reason they've signed Christian Eriksen, which is another subplot to well.
I don't have enough audio on this podcast to get into that.
Yeah.
But look, state of play. I think Juventus are vulnerable. I've been burnt before saying that. The last couple of seasons, 2018-19, I picked Napoli for Sarri, and they came close, and ultimately I was wrong. Last year I picked Inter, and I was wrong. So I feel like you go against the house, and the house always wins. But a second year of Conte, guys. I mean, come on! Like a second year of Conte, if they sort of iron out some of the wrinkles that were in this team, well, not really in the team, but just like in their attitude and mentality in certain games, then I think they win. Just like I don't get the pessimism. I mean, I'm looking at the subs they brought on Saturday night. Alexis, who he's been a completely different player since lockdown, or even when he's just been fit for Inter. He's been very good. Vidal, Nainggolan, Hakimi, Stefano Sensi. I mean, I always remember out of the
reason why he brought those players on is because his starting lineup was horrible. You played Ashley Young and Brozovic and Eriksen again. Like, we've watched this movie. Like, it doesn't work.
I knew that was coming.
The thing is, I don't sort of have a problem with the starting 11. Right, I have a problem in that it needed correcting. That's fair. But at the same time, like just as Pirlo was saying, look, I've had no preseason. I've got no friendlies to experiment with stuff. We're going to have to do this whilst we're on the job, so to speak, in live games, proper games that mean something. I don't really have a problem with that. And, when you do have 5 substitutes and you are facing Beppe Iachini as your opposite number, ultimately things are going to come your way, and I think that's kind of what happened with Inter. I mean, I personally was intrigued by that starting 11. I wanted to see what Kolarov was like as a kind of left-sided centre-back. We've seen it occasionally at Roma. We've seen it occasionally at Man City. I think the whole centre-back situation at Inter is fascinating at the moment, because it seems like the club is going in the direction that they're okay with having wing-back, centre-back cover, in terms of essentially Kolarov can, in theory, do what D'Ambrosio does on the right-hand side. He just does it on the left. He's a wing-back who can play as a right-sided centre-back. You've got Bastoni playing through the middle. That was curious for, the fact that Skriniar was on the bench, even though before the game, Ausilio basically said, look, we're not selling him. And then Conte, after the game, said, well, good enough offer. I don't know. Which is amazing.
Piero Ausilio from now on he is Baghdad Bob. There's nothing he says that I believe that comes out of his mouth. It's clear that he's sent by this club to go out and lie. This is because that whole song and dance he did about, and it's not just now. The whole song and dance routine he did about not having money. And then the whole song and dance routine way back then when Mazzarri was sacked, when he, 3 days before Mazzarri was sacked, said, what? Mazzarri leaving? We need 11 Mazzaris on the pitch. And then they sacked Mazzarri. So nothing this man says. It's just, he is their hatchet guy. He goes out and just says whatever.
I am curious to know what you guys all think of Ausilio.
As a sporting director, I think he's brilliant. But I don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth in the when he talks to the media. This is not just now. It's just everything that he's ever said. It's clear that he goes out there to just tout the party line. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant to him. But that's what he does. And it's the Skriniar thing and Kante thing is so obvious that he says what he just says whatever he's told to say. And that's great, but that just hurts his credibility in the media, and I don't understand why they even send him out, because we can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. Like that's how I view it. I want to get Mo in on this. You got a question for James, and then also share your thoughts on Pier Ausilio.
Surprisingly, far less pessimistic than you, Nima, about the whole mercato and incomers and the prospects for the season. But I wanted to go back to the pitch with you, James, and following on with what Will had said and the starting lineup, etc. We've spoken extensively on this podcast about trying to fit Eriksen in the squad. What's the deal? Why is it? I mean, we say that he doesn't have sufficient defensive cover from the midfield and physicality, and especially when Brozovic plays, etc. But then Sensi comes in and in just a few minutes does what essentially is, the perfect interpretation of that role. So I'm starting to really not understand what's up with Eriksen. Is it a matter of the midfield module? Is it where he's deployed, the role that he's required to play? Is his last year of malaise at Tottenham something more symptomatic of something more like a deeper lying problem with him and his developments as a player? What are we supposed to do with this Eriksen situation?
Well, look, I mean, Eriksen is supposed to be the finished article, right? I mean, he fits in with what Nima was saying about, Vidal, Kolarov. You're signing someone who you know what you're going to get. The curious thing about Eriksen is when you have a manager who plays this way, why are you signing that player? Because I spoke to an agent of a player who is strongly linked with Inter in January. They were very keen on signing him, and he ended up basically taking his player to another club because he didn't think that the number 10 position at Inter exists, and thought that his client would have all the problems that Christian Eriksen is having now, which is he's not necessarily a fish out of water, but he's not playing well either. And I think one of the reasons for that is if you watch Inter, both Lautaro and Lukaku like to come short, to involve themselves in Inter's build-up play from the back. They like to combine. And in that scenario, I think often they are in the zones, the areas of the pitch where Christian Eriksen would usually like to basically be picking up the ball and dictating the play. And it just hasn't happened for him. He's had a couple of good games. Ludogorets, Samp, those are the ones that I can kind of remember where you think, wow, okay, this is really clicking for him. But I just don't think this works for Inter. I like it when they have, Brozovic in midfield. My favorite kind of midfield that they had last year was Sensi for the first, 2 months of the season before he got injured in the Derby d'Italia, was Inter's best player, in my opinion. And then pretty much from October till December, it was the Lukaku-Lautaro show. And they were never able to get Sensi fit on a regular basis again. So it doesn't really surprise me that when Sensi comes back, he just has a natural affinity in this system and with these players. But, I don't know what they do with Eriksen. I really don't. For me, in some respects, he has to play. It's an either or with Lautaro. Either he plays with Lukaku and that's it. But the thing is, we all know that the alternative for up front is Alexis. Alexis is the guy who's going to play instead of Lautaro or instead of Lukaku. So I don't get it.
Yeah, you want the most out of Lukaku. You need to have a second striker next to him, even if he's playing with not a second striker, but like a one behind him, and then Eriksen. You don't get the best out of Romelu. He needs someone to play off.
Because now you've got Kolarov who can bang it in from free kicks. You just don't need Eriksen. And it's interesting because at the moment, obviously, there's a week to go until the end of the transfer window, and there's still, we've had some kind of chatter today about Inter being interested or in talks with another midfield player. And I look at the midfield and I was like, why do they need another midfield player? They've got so many. Is it just because they're thinking about shipping out Vecino and they're going to bring this other guy in? But like, for me, it doesn't work. And that's why, as much as Nima was, you were talking about the starting 11, I did want to see, what Conte has been working on for the last 3 weeks and how this is going to work. And ultimately, aside from, Eriksen, nicking the ball over the top for Lautaro's second goal, which is all about Lautaro really basically holding off his man and being strong. I think Amrabat knocked him to the ground. He got himself up, still managed to score. Aside from that, what did Eriksen really contribute in that game? It's little or nothing.
Mike, did you have a question for James?
I did. So the irony of all of how much Antonio Conte loves experience is that the guy in the back line this weekend, the only one who didn't look out of place, even though he's playing a new position, was Alessandro Bastoni, the 21-year-old. And my question is just the rise that this guy has had over the last calendar year really has come out of nowhere. And it's gotten to the point now where I think there are some bigger picture questions that I have in mind. And one of which is, as we're staring down the barrel, not just of next summer's European Championships, but of a World Cup coming up, based on what you've seen of him, both so far and then just the potential he obviously has with his size, his touch, his defending, all of it. Where do you put him in sort of the pile of potential center backs who could be protagonists at that next World Cup? I'm not even just talking about maybe necessarily the players his age, but even more established guys like Romagnoli who are several years older. He's a piece that's going to be somewhere in Italy's future. But what do you think the ceiling is, and do you think he could be somebody who evolves into one of their starting center backs sooner than later?
So I think he's great. For a number of reasons. Let's not forget what Inter paid for him, which was close to, if not in excess of 30 million euro, and he had played a handful of games for the first.
Wasn't there some accounting tricks with that though, where they sent some other players back to lower the figure or something to that effect?
It's Italy. Yeah, it's Italy. I mean, this is what happens. Look, they've sent a few players Atalanta's way, who we all know will become world beaters and make Inter look very silly in the near future. But I think with Bastoni, it's not easy to convince a coach like Antonio Conte to give you a shot. And he played regularly second half of last season. Particularly, I think, when Conte had a problem, which was he didn't trust Godin. And so he moved Skriniar back over to his kind of natural side because he's a right-footed player, right-footed centre-back. Not that worked out so well, final third of last season, but I think Bastoni being a left-footer, and we had a really good piece on our site, which me and Mike work for, The Athletic, if you want to
subscribe if you haven't already.
Exactly. Sure, there's a deal. There's a deal somewhere. I visited the Italian Football Federation in February, and they said that this guy was an absolute stud for bringing the ball out the back and key passes. Siri has, for some reason, just decided to answer a question that I didn't ask Siri. So sorry about that. But they really rate Bastoni within the Italian FA for this ability to basically, I was going to be a sensible Bonucci, I suppose, in his ability to kind of break lines with his passes, to be bold enough to basically step up, and if, for example, your opponent's strikers are too preoccupied with, the fullbacks or the other centre-backs around you, step into midfield and try and build the play. And he's done really well at that. But I also think, second half against Fiorentina, he was just brilliant defensively. At points, So I expect once De Vrij is fit again, he'll go back to left centre back. I don't think Kolarov is going to be playing there other than as an alternative. And the other guy that the people in the Italian FA are really hot on is Pirola. And I thought it was very interesting to hear Conte speak about Pirola a bit in his first press conference of the season, because in Italy's youth teams, Pirola has done very, very well, and I just wonder if, with Skriniar's future still up for debate, despite what Ausilio said. I know there's been all these links with Milenkovic, and we know that Conte likes to have someone who's sort of ready now, even though Milenkovic is still young. He's 24, but he's probably played 3 seasons as a starter in Florence. I think Pirola comes into the thinking at least as kind of a replacement for Ranocchia. So yeah, I think in terms of like the hierarchy within the national team at the moment, obviously it's I mean, that's been quite curious to follow through qualifying, because Bonucci's been the mainstay, and then it's been like choosing who plays next to him. Romagnoli lost his place. Acerbi took that place from him, and I think Acerbi deserved that on the basis of what he did last year at Lazio. He was pretty magnificent up until March, when they all kind of collapsed for various reasons. I'm a little bit careful about basically saying this is going to be the centre-back partnership that Italy will have over the next decade, and naming a Bastoni, because I've kind of done that before with Rugani, and that didn't work. I mean, everyone, in that kind of, when Romagnoli came through at Roma and Rugani was playing every week at Empoli, it was like, wow, look, Italy have got 2 amazing prospects at centre-back coming through, and Romagnoli's played pretty much every game since then, but yeah, he captains Milan at the moment, but is he really convincing there?
I call that the Ranocchia syndrome, because if you remember, Ranocchia was going to be the new Nesta because he looked like Nesta. Only that's where the comparisons end. He does not play like Alessandro Nesta.
Yeah. I mean, I do always think that Inter in a way failed Ranocchia as much as Ranocchia failed himself. That was a situation where development wasn't happening, and so much of Milan with Romagnoli, it's been so topsy turvy, and that's what makes me cautiously optimistic, maybe more than just cautiously optimistic about Bastoni. Isn't just what he's doing now, but it's that even that though this is Pazza Inter, there seems to be an actual infrastructure and culture to prioritize some development for the first time in God knows how long with young players at Inter.
Look, I think certainly Bastoni's had that structure around him at Atalanta and within the Italian Football Federation. I haven't heard anyone from the Italian Football Federation speak so highly of a defender in a while than they do about Bastoni. And then I think the other great thing that he had was a year next to Bruno Alves at Parma. Parma have done a great job of basically working the loan market the last couple of years. Kulusevski last season, Bastoni this season. They'll probably get one of Colli or Traore from Atalanta, because Parma have just basically decided, we're going to become like Atalanta's finishing school, or we're going to convince top players to pay 40 million to you rather than to us for a player that has basically played every game for us. But yeah, I think. At Inter, it's interesting because, as with Juventus, people will look at the fact that they've signed Vidal, they've brought back Perisic, Nainggolan's come back. They've got people who've been around the block like Lukaku. People forget how young Lukaku still is. They've got Handanovic, who is, if not 50, certainly talks like someone who's... and people forget that there's people like Bastoni, Hakimi, Barella, Lautaro's still young. I tell you what, really, I really felt sorry for on Saturday night, looking at the subs as they came on. So, Vidal came on, Nainggolan came on, and I was like, oh, Gagliardini.
Stop.
He'll never live that down, Inter. It's like, when's Gallia's opportunity going to come? It's done.
He's had it, but he misses open goals from a yard out. So
he was super glued to the pitch in that run-in last year.
Yeah,
so
and he was awful.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, I suppose. Like, contrast opening game of this season with opening game of last season, the Lecce game that we all get like super excited about because Fabio Liverani just like, please attack my team and score as many goals as you possibly desire. But like, I mean, Ranocchia started that game, Vecino started that game. Looking at the subs, they brought in Gagliardini, Politano, and Barella, who wasn't ready. The bench had Lazzaro on, who's obviously gone to Gladbach, Federico Di Marco, Berni as well.
Legend.
Has Berni been replaced?
Yes. Padelli is the third one, and Radu's.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. Padelli, Jesus. I mean, that was a shocker for Inter when Handanovic got injured. They're deep. My God, Inter are deep. Asamoah started that game. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Asamoah. Jesus.
I've yet to hear a satisfying explanation for why he hasn't played when it's not like anybody at left back has played that well since he's been gone, but somehow nobody will throw him near the pitch. Nobody's explained this to me.
Well, it was for a while a case of injuries, and then it became, I don't fancy this guy, go get me an Ashley Young. And to be honest, I don't know what you guys make of Young. No, he's not. Again, Young is not young. But for me, he did much better than I expected him to do.
For sure. Yeah. But the problem is that the alternative to that deal was to send Politano to Roma and get Spinazzola, which would have been a good decision. But we don't do good decisions when Antonio Conte is at Inter. We go for because as Gab Marcotti always says, Italy is this magical place where everyone is a talent until they're 30 and then they're ready to play. and it's Conte, he has his giocatori esperti hang up, and Kolarov and Ashley Young are part of that. I mean, if you remember the Politano thing, it was embarrassing. He was in Rome, he was in Milan, the other one was in Milan, and then all of a sudden
he had the scarf on, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean,
he had the training shirt on.
Yeah.
Excited to welcome Politano back to Rome.
Yeah, I bet you were. I was excited to take Spinazzola off your hands because I really liked that guy. And then Antonio, I got Conted again. So he Contes me all the time. This summer has been this one long Nima being Conted by Conte all the time with Kumbulla and Tonali. Don't get me started. Anyway. Well, so if you look at the season and if you look at the Serie A as a whole, I mean, who do you predict from positions 1 to 6 and Coppa Italia winner, Supercoppa, and Capocannoniere, James?
So I think Inter will win.
Oh, come on. You're just saying that because you're on our pod. You can't seriously.
I said it last year. I just Conte is an exception.
You can't be burned twice. It can't possibly happen.
I think Conte is an exceptional manager. How he. Yeah, well, I think how he handles himself in the media is a separate thing.
Absolutely.
But I think he's an outstanding manager. Then, I mean, I would say Juve. I mean, I'm quite excited by what I have seen from Juve. Even against Roma, they didn't play very well, but I like the idea behind what they're trying to do there. And I think that could be good. Third, I think will be Atalanta. I think if either of the two teams above them have an off season, I wouldn't rule Atalanta out for doing something spectacular. For fourth, man, I like what Milan have done. I really like what Milan have done in the window. I just think Zlatan is the glue that has brought that team together. You speak to any of the players there, and they say that, particularly the young players, and they're almost all young players at Milan, he takes the pressure off them. So yeah, I think that's my top four. Oh Jesus, I've forgotten Napoli. What am I doing? Napoli are super dangerous. See, this is so hard. This is so hard.
I think that this is the hardest year to predict since we've done these predictions. I've literally, Roger, while you've been speaking, James, I've been doing it on my computer and I've swapped, I think, every team from a different position to the one I had in at the start 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
like going along because I forgot Napoli as well.
So that's the thing. I watched Napoli last week and this week, and Jesus, I mean, if they can keep Koulibaly, I think there's no reason why that team can't contend. I don't understand. I don't see why they're not in contention. I mean, I look at
they're my number one candidate, number one threat to Juventus Scudetto title is Napoli.
Not over Inter.
Yeah. There are too many question marks at Inter. There are way too many question marks at Inter. Napoli to me looks like a team. I mean, at this point of the season, when 1 week left of the Mercato, you look at the squad and then you look at what questions are being asked. And the questions being asked at Napoli is who's going to be a backup central defender and who are we gonna have as a fourth choice central midfielder? That's a team that's in balance. Everything else is in balance, and all the important questions have been answered. At Inter, that central defense is far from finished, and you don't know who's staying, who's going. You have you have Andrea Pinamonti that's supposed to act as backup for Romelu Lukaku, which is
I don't mind that.
Well, I think that's ridiculous because he can't act as a backup to Romelu Lukaku. I mean, it's Andrea, he's got Raiola as his agent, and that's why he's earning 2.1 million euros a net, and that's brilliant. But for him, but for Inter, and then you look at the wing backs, and then you say, okay, Hakimi's world class, but Ivan Perisic playing on the left, he was, that's a big question mark. And then you have Darmian and Ashley Young as your backups. To me, there are way too many question marks in this team to be contending.
What does go in order Mo and Mike think?
I listen, until Juventus loses, I'm not picking against Juventus. It's really just the way it's going to go.
Smart man, Mike. He must be athletic.
That's why they hired me, right? I mean, with
Inter, I feel on this show tonight.
I think with Inter though, I mean, I am with Nima that I think Inter will finish second. I'm not ready to put Napoli above Inter, although I see why Nima believes that's possible. I do think there are a lot of questions. I've maintained for a while that I think the highest ceiling that this club can have is if they genuinely committed to building around Eriksen in the midfield and not just saying we're going to tweak the formation to allow for a number 10, but actually giving him room to work, actually putting physical midfielders behind him, actually putting Achraf Hakimi next to him, which is, I think, partly how Sensi looked so good when he came in. Because Eriksen, if you look at the numbers weighed in the Premier League, that's a type of player Inter haven't had. But Antonio Conte is not going to do that. And as a result, I mean, I'm honestly this season, I'd like to see them finish second. I'd like to see them get out of the group. I would like to see progress. And then I would like for the club, when Antonio Conte doesn't get the Scudetto after hijacking the Mercato, the club to say, okay, let's find someone who, as a manager, who is truly in harmony with this bigger picture long term.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, you know me, Nima, huh? Like I rarely believe. No, but I also rarely believe in the Scudetto from the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think this is our year. Honestly, I'm all in. I don't know. Okay. I don't know why. I don't see what questions you're asking. I see a
midfield. I see a midfield problem with Brozovic and Eriksen who can't play, and you don't know if Brozovic's staying or going. I see if you want to, and the only way that you can use Christian Eriksen is if you have an N'Golo Kante who runs for three people. But given that Antonio Conte not burnt the bridges with Chelsea, he nuked them with Chelsea. They're not going to give him anything for free.
I would be confident. Like the midfield for me isn't a problem, right? Because like
the place. Honestly, I see a lot of options. I don't see a lot of problems. I look at our midfield, and I think we're the best midfield in the Serie A by miles. Like the ability to bring on Vidal and Sensi off the bench when you need them the most. I'm not even putting Nainggolan, and not even counting on Nainggolan. Finally, having Gagliardini and Vecino out of the picture, even if not on paper, but in reality, they're out of the picture. This is amazing. This is a squad that's built on the foundations of last year, but improved in terms of in the areas where we were suffering the most, which is depth and quality off the bench. And there's no denying that the quality that came off the bench this past game, first of all, A, transformed the match, and B, was miles. I mean, these should be our starters, and eventually they're going to be our starters. But and this is not even counting that we're going to get a Kante-esque player, Kante and Ndombele, whoever, and fill in the blank. But I understand what you're saying in that we don't have a formation, but neither do Juventus. They don't have a midfield.
But Napoli do. But that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Napoli do.
Yeah, but
and they look good.
So much more quality. We have so much more quality and depth than Napoli over 38 matches. A and B. I think fundamentally, Conte is a smarter, wiser, more accomplished manager than Gattuso is at the moment. Perhaps Gattuso in 4 or 5 years' time can become a top manager in his own right, which he might well become. But
what I would say to that is, if you look at Gattuso, when he took over Napoli, they were 7th, and he won the cup. He performed extremely well in big games. But if you look at where Napoli ended up, they ended up 7th. Now, I think the vibe within the team is much better than it was last year. They've improved the team. I like the fact that Lozano is a new signing. Osimhen is a new signing. And that midfield of Fabian and Zielinski is exciting. But I don't think Napoli are, let's say, as ready to win the title now as they were in Sarri's final year. That was a title-winning team, and unfortunately, it came up against the Juventus side that was still at its peak with world-class manager who just knows how to manage moments. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting, I suppose, and is a little bit of an unknown about all the managers aside from Conte, although you can maybe say this about Conte too, is managing the big moments. I look at the competition. I don't know that about Pirlo, for example, at the moment. I don't know about it with Gattuso. I don't know about it with Gasperini. The only one who has a proven track, the only guy who's won the league is Conte. And I was going to make this point before, but I remember coming out of the Derby d'Italia, the first one in Milan last season, when Juventus won 2-0 or 2-1. Dybala scored an amazing goal after 15 minutes. And I remember Conte after that game pointing out Juventus's bench, and he said something like, "Dove si pesca bene." Where you go, wherever you fish, there's good fishing to be done. And that you take off this player, you bring on Higuain. You take off that player, you bring on Douglas Costa. You take off this player, you bring on Ramsey. You take off this player, you bring on De Ligt or Chiellini, whoever it was at the time. And now you look at Inter, my oh my. I mean, that bench is as strong a bench as I've seen in Serie A for a long time. I get the kind of Vidal and Nainggolan and what they.
I don't. For me, no, I'm okay with them. It's like I understand that that's the kind of characters he wants, and he's wanted them for a long time. And to me, that's a strategy change, and I'm okay with that. The Kolarov thing and the Perisic thing and the Eriksen and Brozovic issue and then Skriniar, these are the things that really bug me. I mean,
I don't think that's something that he has. I think what's really interesting about this is that those guys would have gone if Bayern Munich had basically said, "Look, we're going to take up the option to sign even Perisic." I think they would still sell Raj Nainggolan if the price is right. I don't think it's Conte basically saying, bring those guys back, I want them back. I think it's just it's what the market is like at the moment. They can't get the money that they initially wanted for these players. There isn't an appetite to sign them on the wages that they've got and for the fee that Inter commands. But I also kind of take the view that if you can keep these guys in this condensed season where you're going to be playing every 3 days and it's going to be attritional, and you could maybe kind of afford to keep them around for a year, please do that. And the other thing, like about the midfield, like I would settle for a midfield that started the season into last year. Like for me, that season had balance, it had penetration, it had invention in Sensi, Brozovic, and Barella. Barella, by the way, who since the Europa League started has been the best Italian midfield player, without question. He's gone to another level. He's just been brilliant. So, and now you're throwing in Vidal, Nainggolan in that. I'm like, okay, well, that's Benvenga. Yeah, that's great.
Well, I hope these. I mean, that's the thing. I hope Nainggolan stays, and that's where I'm worried that I think that they will be forced to cash in on him. And when they cash in on him, I fear that the replacement will, that he'll go back to Gagliardini again, and that's where I'm, that's what bothers me.
Gagliardini right now is what, like 6th, 7th in the pecking order. Like if I'm Roberto Gagliardini, I'm phoning Giuseppe Rizzo, my agent, and saying, Giuseppe, there's a European Championship coming up in the summer. Or what am I going to do here? I know Conte likes me, but realistically, am I gonna get the kind of game time that I need?
And Giuseppe Rizzo would, if he's honest, say that the European Championships, you honestly think you've got a prayer to be part of that squad?
I mean, come on.
I can't believe your career as an agent never took off with advice like that.
I mean, look at that central midfield. Where is Gagliardini going to do? Going to carry the water to the training? I mean, what is he going to do? Barella, Sensi, Tonali. I mean, come on. He's not. Come on.
The thing with Perisic, though, which is interesting, is just like I remember, sort of going on tour with Inter last year, and he tried him in the 2 up front with who was it? Samuele Longo, something like that. And was convinced after like the first friendly it wasn't working, and like now as a wing back, or it's not as a wing back, it's kind of like what Juventus do, right? It's kind of like we shuffle across and he becomes a winger. He's not a wing back. But I don't know. I suppose the left side is something that I look at. And I mean, it's always in wide areas. Until they signed Hakimi, I've always looked to that right hand side and thought, Jesus, that's been the fullback areas have been a problem for Inter since Maicon left. With left wing back, I honestly think they're happy. They're happy with Young. They're happy with Perisic. And Damian can play either side. He can play back. He can play either side. So,
well, just to round up, like, so you think Inter will win?
Oh God. Sorry.
Yes. So you think Inter will win the Scudetto? Did you say Juventus second or did you say Atalanta second? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, and then I remember there's a team called Napoli.
Okay. So
I still think Juventus finished second because I think they have depth, match winners off the bench. Dybala. I mean, Dybala hasn't played yet. God knows what they're going to be like when Dybala plays. Atalanta or Napoli third. Oh, I don't know. I think that's tough. I think my heart says Atalanta just because I think that experience in the Champions League is going to really help them. I think and the goals come easier to them. I know Napoli have just scored 8 goals in 2 games, but goals come easier to Atalanta than any other team in Serie A, and goals win games. So let's say my top four is going to be Inter, Juventus, Atalanta, Napoli. Milan fifth. Milan fifth, sixth. Oh God, I don't
Roma.
Well, yeah, but then again, Lazio have more or less the same team as they did last year. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
Like I agree with Will. I could shuffle those guys. I could shuffle the seven, and the only thing that would surprise me is, Roma winning the title, Milan winning the title, Lazio winning the title. I think any of the other four winning the title, maybe I'd be a bit surprised if Napoli and Atalanta won it, but it wouldn't shock me.
No,
but I think
agree.
That's where I'm kind of looking at.
There's going to be a strong top four contender that finishes seventh, whatever happens.
Yeah.
So two teams are going to have rubbish seasons.
Who do you think is going to win the Coppa Italia, and who do you think is going to become the capocannoniere?
Well, Coppa Italia has really been between Juventus and Lazio, hasn't it, for the last decade? I think,
apart from last season.
Apart from last season, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's been three teams. It's been Napoli, Lazio, and Juventus have won it for the last decade. I think Napoli do it again. I think that's probably a reasonable call. I'd love to see Atalanta win something, but I think maybe Napoli do it just because of what we saw from them last season, not in winning the actual trophy itself, but they ran the gauntlet. They knocked out the holders, Lazio. They knocked out Inter in the semi-finals. They knocked out Juventus in the final. Capocannoniere, it should be an Atalanta player.
Okay.
It should be an Atalanta player. For me, I would say Zapata.
Who do you reckon is going to win the Supercoppa then?
It's so hard at this moment in time. I'd probably say Napoli. And that's, I'm excited by what I've seen from Juventus, but I do think that if it was a very interesting test against Roma on Sunday night to see them come up against a team that actually attacks and has offensive weapons. So yeah, Napoli, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, James, we've really taken too much of your time. Thank you so much. I know you've got probably lots of stuff coming out, so I was thinking, do you want to plug something that's coming out? What have you got coming out on The Athletic?
I'm kind of spent after that Milan epic. We've just had an interview with Parma's new owner, Karl Kraus, come out, but we're hoping to do something with Fiorentina and one of the tormentors of Inter from the other night. But an interview that we had fell through with one of their players who is subject of some transfer speculation at the moment, as he has been pretty much every window for the last 3 windows. But we're trying to get the guy who played a lovely pass to him to score against Inter the other night. So I don't know. I can't guarantee you anything at the moment, Nima. It's okay. The Athletic, which Mike says is the greatest sports site on the planet. And if you're not a subscriber, you should subscribe because it keeps an eye on the roof.
No, you should subscribe. You should subscribe. Mainly, if you're into Serie A, generally, seriously now, James, what you've been doing there, I've said it to you privately. I say it to you in public. I think it's amazing. It really is amazing. And keep up the amazing work on there.
We try. If Inter would like to with someone, that would be. I like to go through the formal channels, but come on Inter.
Antonio Conte from you, James.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like, I weirdly did an interview with Conte. What is it? A few years ago, which was like oddly through like a sponsor, which was Sure for Men, the deodorant. And he was charming. Conte was like utterly charming. We did like these horrendous photos, me and him like smiling in front of a whiteboard drawing up tactics before the FA Cup final. But yeah, I really want to know, the kind of stuff that L'Équipe got out of him last year, which was, sort of which sexual position you should assume on the before the game. So yeah, we'll see what we can do.
I've just found the picture that you were talking about. You're giving him a lesson in how to draw arrows on a whiteboard.
I was saying, I was telling him, I was looking into the future, saying
that's where Kolarov is going to play.
pretty much. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, wow. Well, if people want to follow you on Twitter, what's your handle?
It's a complicated one. It's at James Horncastle, Horncastle. They're like the small town in Lincolnshire.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you very much, James, for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
Take care. Thank you. Right, that was our good friend James Horncastle, who always takes time to talk with us, and we're very happy. So let's move on. I just quickly want to touch base on the game against Fiorentina, because I think it kind of was a microcosm of why I don't think Inter will win the Scudetto. I think they'll finish in the top 4 comfortably, but I don't think they'll win. But we're going to have, after the Mercato, we're going to have a run-through of the Mercato based on how Inter have done. We're all going to give our ratings, and then we're also next week going to give our predictions for the season as well. I think with so much uncertainty concerning the big teams, Juve and Inter and Milan, etc., I think it's kind of hard to do a prediction right now. So therefore we won't. But for me, the issue is Brozovic and Eriksen. When they play together, the midfield gets overrun, and the only way that Inter can use Eriksen is if N'Golo Kante is in the team. That's not going to happen. Or if they play Mazzarri's favorite formation, 3-5-1-1, and I have no problems with that if it's Barella, Vidal, and Nainggolan behind Eriksen, because that's that's FC shithousery on a level that I would absolutely love. But that's Conte, and then you have Eriksen. He can jog on the pitch, and that's fine. But that's not going to happen. So I and then I think Kolarov will hemorrhage goals, as many free kicks as he scores. I think there will be issues there, and there's too many question marks. Will for me defensively as well. So. And I thought that was all on display against Fiorentina, and Fiorentina were good, but they weren't that good, and Inter made them look that good. And it's a recurring theme with Antonio Conte since January, with Brozovic and Eriksen, the way that the midfield gets overrun. We make teams look better than they are, and this troubles me. And this troubles me when Eriksen is on the pitch, and I think he should be on the pitch, like Mike said. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts just quickly before we move on. Mo, what did you make of the game? Like, I mean, you always find the silver lining in every cloud, but if I were to ask you to be a little bit negative, what didn't you like, and as opposed to what did you like the most?
First of all, I really didn't like Perisic. I thought Perisic was god awful. This isn't his role.
Yes.
He feels like he's unintegrated into the side. I think Young does an infinitely better job on the left flank, and I think if it's a matter of Conte trying to find balance in the squad and trying to, by playing Young on the right side, but clearly it was an experiment, an ill-conceived experiment. So this is something I really didn't like, and I don't think we're going to see too much of it either. I think Young as our starting left wing back is fantastic. Lord knows what's going to happen with Alberto Carlos, but we between him and
João Mario.
Yeah, exactly. Between him, Perisic, and Kolarov, I think we have adequate cover on that role. But I think the biggest question, of course, is what you've spoken about. Do you get the best out of Eriksen, who's clearly the player with the most technical ability and talent on your roster? What do you do to get the most out of him, knowing that Brozovic is probably your best tactical midfielder at the back? So honestly, I don't know. I think you play with you play. I have a question I wanted to ask you guys earlier. Is why is it that Eriksen can't interpret the Sensi role? What is it about Eriksen's attributes that prevents him from from interpreting that. I mean, it's neither a 10 or an 8, but that role in between these two positions, in the same way that Sensi seems to do it so fluidly and effortlessly. I don't know. And honestly, we know that Eriksen had been suffering over the last year or so in Tottenham under a completely a system and a module that was tailor-made for him, etc. So I don't know what the issue is here. But when I see Sensi on the pitch, really filling that gap so effortlessly, so perfectly suited for that position, I don't know. I don't know what to think.
Mike, I think I'll let you answer that.
I mean, I think it's twofold. I think what Sensi can do that Christian Eriksen can't is Sensi isn't as good of a passer as Eriksen. He's a very good one, but he can force the issue with his own movement. Sensi can dribble. Sensi can, and this isn't, Kylian Mbappe out there, but he can create with his own movement, and then as the defense starts collapsing into him, then he makes the pass. Eriksen can't do that. Eriksen needs support around him. But what I think, this is what we're dealing with here. It sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. This is from the time Christian Eriksen started the Premier League to the day he left. He created more chances, more assists, scored more goals outside the box, and more free kick goals than anybody in England. And we can sit here, we can have a debate about, is the English Premier League the best league in the world or not? But the bottom line is that this guy was the best player in the league at all those things, was the best creative threat on a Champions League finals side. If he can do that there is a way to do that here, but I think it does evolve more building around him. So the question is going to be, is the juice worth the squeeze? I think it is. I think he can take this side to another level. But Sensi in the current system is able to work with a little less space. He's able to dribble a little more, and that does make things easier for Conte, who likes to have those physical midfielders. I mean, it's worth noting, right? Like, set aside even what Eriksen is or isn't doing and, how many goals or assists he is or isn't creating. When was the last time you've seen him take a shot outside the box when he's that good of a striker from distance? He doesn't, because there's not space. And I think the other aspect of getting him to his best, and Conte's not going to do this, forget just technically tweaking what he's going to do. So much of what this guy does is all about subtleties and about understanding the players around him and about creating space for them and playing off of them, right? Harry Kane and him did it all the time in Tottenham. But you know why that happened? Because you got to get this guy 10, 12 matches with Lautaro, with Lukaku, play them together, let them understand how to work together. And when people sit here and go back to January and they say, well, he hasn't looked good. Well, okay, first of all, I think all of us know any player adapting to Italy from England, that's a big tactical switch. But you're talking about a guy who wasn't in the best form coming from England. Then he plays a few matches. The season stops. The season restarts, goes through Europe, and when they're in that European run, Conte sticks with what brought him there, and it's self-destruct against Sevilla, but whatever, he's going to go with the same lineup. Then there's no preseason to really integrate him in the way that you would like to, because that was what everybody thought, right? Oh, he might look a little off in the first 6 months, but it's okay. Preseason next year, you get him a couple.
Yeah.
Adapt. Well, he hasn't had those things. And that's not to make excuses all the way, because he should be better. But I watched that first half, and the people who thought that he was the worst player on the pitch, I don't know what they're talking about, because that guy still made passes other players can't make. They weren't always going in, but that's the familiarity aspect. To wrap this up for what my thoughts were from the game, because I'm already droning on, the one thing that I will say is, one, and this is going to be the tension with Conte, Hakimi needs to be out there. But Hakimi isn't. I mean, Conte flat out said after the game he doesn't trust Hakimi's defending yet, which is highly predictable for Conte to say, and also highly predictable because Achraf Hakimi, anybody who watches Achraf Hakimi knows he's basically Dani Alves, where he's so good going forward, you live with it. I do worry a lot about Hakimi on that right side, and if you're really going to ship out Skriniar, then Danilo D'Ambrosio behind him. That feels like we can sit here and talk about Kolarov on the left, and that's a problem, but Kolarov isn't going to start a lot on the left when, De Vrij is healthy and Bastoni's on the left. But we are probably getting a lot of Danilo D'Ambrosio on the right. And I don't know if I trust him to do all that cover all year long. But the second and last thing I'll say this is about Sant Danilo, which is it cannot be said enough that he's a good, not great defender. He isn't great going forward. But I'll be damned. I don't think there's been an Inter player the last 5 years who has found his way into more critical moments and stepped up when somebody needed to step up than that guy.
So true.
And it's remarkable because the people who complain about him miss the point, which is that, he's sometimes, Conte loves his experience, and he loves guys who, what he believes that means is that experience creates champions. Well, that isn't necessarily the case, as we saw from Kolarov on the left, who just doesn't look like he can do what they're asking him to do. But on the right side, Danilo D'Ambrosio hasn't won a damn thing in his career at Inter. But you know what? That guy's a champion, because when something needs to happen, he makes it happen. And I will, for whatever we want to criticize about his play, the full package is more than the sum of its parts. And that's why I will always love having that guy in this club.
Well, I think what you're saying there is kind of, I agree with it to some extent, and it's not his fault that Inter have failed to be able to find a better option for him. When he is what he is, and he always gives everything he has, and that's and he always, when it matters the most, he comes in clutch, and I think that's not his fault. That's Inter's fault for not being able to elevate the level of the squad.
And I think that's so much of the issue with Gagliardini, or the issue with Aleksandar Kolarov, right? Like, we all knew Gagliardini shouldn't be starting in a Europa League final. Everybody who watched this club knows that. But ultimately, and yes, he was terrible and he helped cost them that match. But guess what? He didn't put himself out there. He was the one thrown into the team sheet by the manager. And so that's what gets so frustrating with Conte. And this is my ultimate fear, right? We just spent so much time with James. And James is right. There is depth in a lot of areas. And while Nima and I think are on the same page about having certain concerns, in the bigger picture, it's not really about what they have or don't have that concerns me. It's that Conte will fall into a rut or a routine of predictability in important situations and throw all of that good sense out the window. That anybody who saw what was going to happen in Sevilla knew that you can't. I said it on the podcast after the semifinal match. Don't run that lineup out there again, and don't play the same way. You'll get beat. It happened. My worry isn't about what Gagliardini can't do, or what Kolarov can't do, or what D'Ambrosio can't do. It's that Antonio Conte won't care and throw them out there and do the easy, safe thing, as opposed to the harder work, which is maybe it will be rough for 2 months. And I might lose some points more than I need to if I really figure out a way to build this around Eriksen like I should. But the payoff of that, of being unconventional and of trying something new, the upside would be so much higher. But I just don't think he's that guy. He's not an idea man. He's sort of this is how things are going to work sort of guy. So I don't even blame D'Ambrosio. I don't blame Kolarov for being a 35-year-old who can't do what they ask him to do. I don't blame Gagliardini for being limited. I blame the manager, and I blame the club.
Good point.
Situations they just shouldn't be in.
For sure. Right. Let's move on to we're playing Benevento and Lazio, and to me, Lazio is the tricky one. Benevento, although they came back good against Sampdoria and were 2-0 down and won 3-2 by 2 goals from former Inter Primavera player Luca Caldirola, who's had one hell of a career. Interesting career trajectory. So, I think we're all kind of agreeing that we're going to win that one. But the Lazio game is a tricky one. I think they're looking good, and I think they're a team that will cause Inter problems. So I'm thinking a 3-1 win against Benevento and a 2-2 draw against Lazio. Just quickly, Mo, what are your 2 predictions?
I'm guessing we'll win against Benevento, and you know what? It's the beginning of the season. I've still got a full tank of optimism. Let's go for 3 points against
love it.
Lazio.
That's why we love you.
Absolutely. Will, give us your predictions.
Well, no word of a lie, Nima. I wrote down exactly the same 2 scores as you during the first half of the podcast. Yeah, 3-1 against Benevento, because Inter doesn't look like a very clean sheet, happy team at the moment. And it's Benevento's first home game, so that makes sense. And I said 2-2 against Lazio because, as you said, there were plenty of holes that a very well-oiled team like Lazio could exploit at the Olimpico. So I'm going to stick with them because they feel right to me. So 4 points, I think. But I would just like to endorse what Mike said about D'Ambrosio, because I don't think we've had a more clutch player at this club in the last 5 years.
For sure.
So
For sure.
Credit where it's due. So it was important to underline that.
Mike, predictions. Where are you on this?
I'll do the same thing as you and Will. It wouldn't shock me if they get 3 at Lazio. It really wouldn't, but that's only because I don't. The storyline for me over the next 2 matches, I just want to see what Conte is going to do. Like, I don't think he's going to run the same midfield out there again. I think he'll probably want Sensi out there sooner than later. Does he trust Vidal soon? Does he get tired of Perisic? It's so hard in the early going to figure this out, and that's what's going to make this season so weird, is that the fixtures are so compressed that Conte probably is trying to decide what he wants to do and who he's going to trust, and he's going to have to do that very quickly and hope that it works very quickly. Otherwise, they're going to be down more points than it should be. But to play it safe, I'll say a draw at Lazio.
The difficult thing with these 2 games is that these are 2 games that are going to be played while the Mercato is still open, and so will that condition Conte's choices? Will he leave Eriksen out if an offer comes in? Will he leave Brozovic out? Will he leave? For instance, I would like to see Skriniar play at the Olimpico rather than D'Ambrosio in centre back. But if he's still in negotiations with Spurs, then it could be that he makes decisions not based on what would be the best in theory to win the match, but because of what the club is doing off the pitch, and that's never ideal. So
my fear is spelled Skriniar out, Armando Izzo in, and that is what keeps me awake at night. That's what gives me nightmares, and I think it's going to happen. I honestly think it's going to happen, and I'm not going to be happy because Armando Izzo to me is just. Right. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right. Let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something in the world of football heavily, starting with the positivity, with his full tank of positivity, Mr. Mystic Mo Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
So honestly, I was going to say D'Ambrosio. He was going to be my Moratti of the week because of all the things that you so put really well together, Mike. But since the D'Ambrosio card's been played, something that I'm absolutely in love with, and that is Inter's third kit for the 2nd year in a row. I mean, last year's was an absolute gem. This year, Nike have done an even better job. It's a throwback to probably the most fantastical, magical season watching Inter as a 17-year-old boy or man. But that third kit this year is just delicious. I absolutely love it. So that'll be right after Santo Danilo. It'll be my Moratti for the week.
Right, let's move on to something a bit more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Beckman.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
This week's Frog is sort of an off-season frog. So it's a frog that covers the few weeks since we last recorded because...
Take your pick.
well, I thought there was only one contender. So I'm going to give this honour to Barcelona because they've given us some great entertainment over the last few weeks. Whether it's Lionel Messi coming out and throwing everyone under the bus when he didn't get his move, saying, there's no project here. They're just trying to fill gaps. Whether it's, the Luis Suarez case where they told him that he could sign for any club that wasn't on the list of clubs they'd given him, and then suddenly when they realized they'd left Atletico Madrid off that list, they changed the conditions with which they were going to let him go. And then they had Messi.
His Italian exam was pretty funny as well.
Yeah, that was pretty funny as well. And then you've got the Messi again coming out and saying Barcelona have treated you terribly. They've got the fact that they've destabilized Lautaro for a few months, and then it turns out that they couldn't afford him. Who could have seen that coming? They've also got the vote of no confidence that's come from one of the board members. You've got Bartomeu, the president, who's been accused of corruption by the Catalan police, having allegedly made financial gains from deals that the club have done. We all love a bit of Schadenfreude when it comes to Barcelona because we all have a bee in our bonnet for whatever personal reason, and it's just been great fun to watch them imploding in front of our eyes over the last few weeks. So that's for all the Lautaro nonsense. And so you're right, Nima. Luis Suarez's Italian exam would have been a great shout, but it's still it doesn't. if he was still going to Juventus, that would have made it even more funny. But I kind of feel like it's a sideshow at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is a sideshow. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, but that was great too.
For sure. And Pantaleo Longo, the guy over at Roma, the general manager at Roma, who didn't register Diawara as an under-22 player, and then against Hellas Verona, leading to Roma losing all 3 points against them because of that clerical error, resigning, and is on his way to Hellas Verona. I mean, it's just, that's I don't know. It's never boring in calcio. Let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Mike Pielucci.
Aleksandar Kolarov. I probably could stop it there because I think we all agree. But for the sake of some elaboration, it's really only partly about him. I mean, he's 35. He's being put in a role that I don't think he really can handle. But end of the day, he's getting thrown out there. I said it on Twitter last week, but this to me reminds me a lot of another transfer of a Serbian of a similar type, which is Mihajlovic a very long time ago. Aleksandar Kolarov is going to add a lot in the dressing room. Aleksandar Kolarov can still whip some nasty free kicks in, but it's going to get dicey every time he's on the pitch. And the question is, how often is that going to happen? I very much worry that this could be a scenario in which he's out there 25 times in a year, and that's going to cost some points. But there is one little shred of hope, and I haven't wanted to cling too much to it, but then James started talking about it, which was Pirola. And a year ago, when I know my reaction, when Antonio Conte said, no, we are not loaning out Alessandro Bastoni, he needs to stay. And I'm thinking there's no way he will play a 20-year-old center back, loan him out and get minutes. Lo and behold, Alessandro Bastoni has been incredible. I don't want to put that sort of pressure on Lorenzo Pirola, but if Conte is leaving him here, it's probably for a reason. And so maybe the best case scenario is sort of a lower stakes version of Bastoni usurping Godin, which is Pirola isn't going to be a starter anytime soon. But what if he becomes that guy who gets trusted more as the backup center back or the backup left center back, enough to push Kolarov up to left wing back, which would create so many other problems. Don't get me wrong, but
God,
that's its own horror show.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Yeah, pretty much. But that is my one thing that I am watching is will Pirola save us from Kolarov being asked to do things that Kolarov shouldn't be asked to do anymore.
For sure. No, I agree. It was quite horrible to watch. And the Skriniar situation is what it is. And then there's so many to this. It's not a good place to be in the last week of the Mercato. But as everyone knows,
I'm good.
Sorry?
I'm just going to lose my mind if this Conte thing happens. I'm just preparing anybody who wants to listen to the next podcast. I'm going to lose my mind if
they get Armando Izzo instead of Milan Skriniar. Yeah.
Even just Conte for Conte's sake. N'Golo Conte, not Antonio Conte. If they sell a 25-year-old center back, I'm going to lose my mind.
We'll have to wait for that because I think that would we'll take that debate next week whether or not it happens because it is Mercato time. We'll be recording after the transfer window closes at 8 p.m. CET next week. And until next week, I'm your host Nima Tavalli Ruzzari, wishing you a good week. 6 points and sempre e solo Forza Inter.